Coach Fam and I were going to talk a little bit about his experience at Minneapolis State and just about his career getting from his early coaching career at Western Michigan and then transferring, or excuse me, your playing career at Western Michigan and then transferring to Western Illinois, and then obviously getting into coaching. So from that, Coach, can you just share with the audience a little bit about yourself?
Yep. So I was born in Connecticut. A family moved out to Milwaukee when I was young. Lived there most of my life. I was, I was kind of your typical 5'10", 180-pound football player. So really entertained opportunities from all different levels. I'm sure everybody watching who coaches probably can recognize at least probably 10 guys on their high school roster about that same build. So I had the opportunities, be a linebacker, some Division III as well. I was a good long snapper of all the random skills. So I went to Western Michigan, started my freshman year, and then ended up transferring to Western Illinois. And Western Illinois I thought was a great fit for me as a student athlete. It was a little smaller division. I took a chance on myself as a walk-on at Western Michigan and ended up playing. Didn't earn that scholarship. So then I ended up finding a place where I did have that scholarship. And then after a few years there, I played for two different head coaches there, Mark Hendrickson and Bob Nielsen. Mark Hendrickson's actually back now as an assistant coach at Western Illinois, and Bob is the head coach of South Dakota. I really wanted to get into coaching. I had great coaches who were awesome mentors. So I just like a lot of coaches, pounded out hundreds and hundreds of resumes all over the country, said I'd be willing to volunteer. I worked like a bartender server job for like 8 months, saved up every penny I could as a broke college student, and then was able to volunteer at the University of North Dakota. Got to learn from Coach Schweigert, who's still there in that staff, and they've had a lot of success at UND, the Fighting Hawks now. And he really taught me a lot of things about like make every day the big time, no matter where you are. Like to him, it might have been the Dallas Cowboys, same thing, UND. And that no job's really too small ever. Like he'd be walking out to practice, he'd carry stuff with him, but he'd still be in charge and still be a person, which is, I think, very important in our profession. And then I had the opportunity to get my feet a little more wet after being there and just, dabbling in everything, video, offense, special teams, recruiting, being a gopher, going out and getting a salted nut roll because the OC needed snacks, stuff like that. And, then went to Wisconsin Lutheran, was a GA, got my master's, got to kind of dabble into being more in the recruiting, hands on the ground, running a room. And then went to Northern State for 2 years, went to Kansas Wesleyan then as offensive coordinator and recruiting coordinator. And you never know what path coaching is going to take you, because I also became a women's coach when we started up the women's flag with the NFL initiative there at Kansas Wesleyan for 2 years. And then after 2 years there, I came to Minot State. Been in Minot. I'm actually under two head coaches. I was last hired by Coach Mike Famiglietti, who I'm very thankful that he brought me aboard, and been working for Coach Shields since he came up in January. And we've been rolling, trying to change what Minot has been known for, being a little different, and now trying to build some success at a program that really hasn't had much since going D2.
Gotcha. So earlier on when you were talking, Coach, you talked about your playing experience and kind of being the underdog, only being like 5'10", 180. So I think that's a great parallel that you can bring to Minot State. So how has that mentality transferred to your coaching career for a program that hasn't necessarily seen much success in the past?
Right. So for me, I always number one, you got to be yourself if you're the 5'10", 185, because, you're not going to beat up too many guys in a fight size wise. But you also got to just, be 100% who you are and be genuine. And I think that's such a key thing in this whole profession. And then being the underdog, you got to always work and keep learning new ways and new crafts and being whatever you are involved in becoming a master of that. And I still understand, hey, there's improvements I still have to make as a coach. I'm only 31. There's coaches who've been doing it for longer than I've been alive who still are making improvements. And I think that's a big thing as an underdog. And then kind of also finding your niche, what's going to separate you from guys who are similar. Like we said, there's tons of 5'10", 185-pound linebackers out there. But not all of them could long snap like I could. Maybe I was a step faster, probably a lot of steps slower than most of them. But you know. Yeah.
Gotcha.
So kind of take that.
Yeah. So how have you taken that ideal of continuously learning and improving yourself to your career and applied that so far?
So I believe that anybody is capable of giving me a tip or some knowledge. I've gotten to talk to high school football coaches from all over the country who've averaged, 50 points a game, or guys have given little tips that I'm like, oh yeah, I'll take that. That's some great advice. I've gotten advice from coaches in Canada on little things to make me better. And I think that's one of the big things is just you never know where that new nugget is going to come from. There's not always just one right way of doing things, but there are wrong ways of doing things. And I think one of the biggest ways to be wrong is that someone is casual, lackadaisical, and not process driven. I think that's kind of one of the big things. A lot of times, many guys are results focused. And a lot of times you kind of skip like, well, how are we going to get to that result? We know where we want to be. Everybody wants to be 1-0 after every single week, but how are we going to get there? Is it a tidbit that we picked up from this high school coach in Fond du Lac, Wisconsin? Or is it, those little things of, hey, we've always been getting better, or, hey, maybe the way we did it last year isn't the right way.
Gotcha. So being process driven, can you talk a little bit more about that?
Yeah. So, I approach a lot for our backs and for our kickers and everybody that we got to do step 1 and step 2 to get to that result that we want. So, we have to have an order of doing things that needs to be done, right? And done correctly to get us to that next level. Like everybody's played a video game. Well, you got to make it through this door to go through that door to go finish the level, right? So anytime we want to go do something, a lot of times we just see, hey, that whole full field in front of us. Well, I got to take those steps to get there. So that's kind of how we are and how I like to be.
Okay.
And sometimes we can all get distracted. It's easy too, but many times you just gotta, what can I control? What am I going to keep doing? And kind of take that ownership a little bit.
Okay. So obviously being process driven from a player standpoint, how do you do that as a coach, maybe communicating that to the player?
That's the toughest thing because all people are different people, right? Yeah. For some guy, it's going to click because, hey, there's some sort of reward there and he has to do this, to do this, to do this, to make it a positive habit. And I think that's where we can teach those positive habits that will incrementally get somebody close. And they have to kind of see their progress along the way as well is really huge. And also not just going, hey, it's not going to be an instantaneous leap forward. There's going to be incremental steps along the way we both need to recognize. And then you need to both, as a coach, recognize improvement and give a full recognition of everything, right? But then you also need to hold to that standard that, hey, now that it's a level up and we aren't meeting that, it's not good enough now.
Right. Yeah. And I think one of the things that I think separates some good players from great players is the ability to not necessarily have to see positive results right away. A quote that I recently saw from he's an online business guru, really. His name's Alex Hormozi. I don't know if you've heard of him before, but he talks about how the world belongs to people who can continue to take action without having to see positive reinforcement and learning from that process. So that what you just said really reminds me of that. And I think being able to, like you were saying, communicate that information to the players is key, but also helping them understand that they're not going to see results right away. It's like you're saying, a process.
Right, exactly. It's kind of like if a guy's too prideful, he's too busy looking into his rearview mirror and his past. But if you're too busy looking in the rearview mirror, you're not going to see what's going in front of you, right? And if you're too busy looking in front of you, you don't know what's coming up behind you and what's right in front of your nose. And that's where we kind of got to keep that focus a little bit.
Right. Okay. So doing some research on you before this, Coach. So you've coached at a few different positions. So how have you applied? Is it different applying these processes to different positions, or do a lot of the same fundamentals apply to majority of the positions you've coached?
I mean, I think some of the fundamentals apply. I think it's all kind of comes down to like four real parts, right? You got every coach knows like the eyes, hands, and feet. Well, then you kind of got your head and your heart, like where are those things? Like how do you need to process certain things at a certain position? Like a long snapper really doesn't need to process much. They just need to run out there, throw the ball between their legs, and go one play and they're good, right? Or like, hey, they need to process like, okay, there's a protection. I got to go this way and not let this guy cross my face, and I got one shot at it. When like a tight end, okay, we got to recognize this front, maybe this coverage. Okay, we got to see this guy rolling. I got to gap down, make sure everything goes there. So I think a big thing for me is number one, like learning how each player in that group ticks, and then also what are the key roles and how do we work into the entire system, right? Because no matter what position we're coaching, they're all doing a 1/11th piece. Like they need the other cogs in the system to fully go. So I just need to figure out what my piece is there, how best I can maximize those guys both on and off the field and show them that I truly care. So that's where they need to see that there's that love from me. And that way we can keep taking those steps forward. All the technique and everything else, like I can learn and everything else. Sometimes I might have to do it, and then just different ways of adapting my teaching to them. Are they a guy who needs to walk through? Are they a guy who can just see someone do it and they can run it? Or are they one that has to write down notes meticulously and give themselves some own coaching points?
Okay, got it. And then also doing some more research on you before this, Coach. I saw you were a Football Scoop Assistant Coach of the Year finalist a few years ago. So
Yes.
what would you say were some of the key accomplishments so far in your career? And I know you said you're only 31, but what do you think so far has led you to that type of recognition?
Well, honestly, I think that year we had phenomenal players and a great staff. I think that was one of the best things for us was that our staff was just really cohesive and worked well together as far as offensively. And I really let a lot of people have like a voice. If your offensive line coach really has a greater understanding of your run game, in which most offensive line coaches do, but giving them a voice is huge. And then finding the best way to get your personnel and everything else. I'm a big believer that like it wasn't just me. Now I'm glad I appreciate like the recognition and the credit, because that just is all due to those young men on the field and every coach that I took the field with every single one of those days, making sure that we got the right guys in each situation, little things like that, and being great at some of the things that we wanted to hammer every single day, I think was something that really made us better. Like literally most of our practice was honestly just going our run game against Bags,
Yeah.
which our O-line coach really brought up all the time, that we just need to become masters of that. So that way, every single situation we've done even the most common situation hundreds of times by the time we've gotten to game day, that it's just another time we've done it in
Yeah,
game.
like second nature. Yeah.
Mm-hmm. And I think a big thing is like a lot of work on the front end. We recruited our tails off. We did a ton of work. And sometimes that's not something you can do at the high school level as much with recruiting. But I think if you can create a positive environment that students want to be in, they're going to get their buddies. Maybe they'll get the basketball player. Maybe the basketball coach will be more appreciative of letting his guys play. Same thing with the track coach. If you have a better team culture and welcoming there, and,
Gotcha.
and I think definitely like, hey, that was great recognition. I think when we won a conference championship, that was huge. I think everything we've accomplished so far at Minot State, while we haven't gotten the wins yet, I think we've seen like a total change of like some belief. Like our guys walk into a game expecting to win and compete no matter who's against us, right? And then I think the opportunity to start up a brand new sport was very interesting, right? I had to completely adapt to coaching women, which I never thought I'd ever do. We had to start a sport from the ground. So like there was no one else we were competing against other than like the schools who also started. So everybody was going through at first, and we had to convince people to come join, or we had to recruit something I never thought. And I think coaching the women was a huge accomplishment too. And, just finding ways to just keep sticking in it is also just tough for everybody.
Definitely.
Mm-hmm.
And I couldn't help but notice too, right behind you, it says EMAB.
Yeah.
What does that stand for?
So that's something our head coach has brought and always believed in. And he was the head coach at Jacksonville before that program, unfortunately terminated. But EMOB is how it's pronounced. It means every man a beaver. So kind of explain that. It means like every one of us, doesn't matter where you are in the depth chart, whether you're a coach, player, you're a beaver. So we're all part of the family. We're all for each other. We all want each other to succeed, and we're going to push each other to succeed. So EMOB.
Okay, I like it.
Mm-hmm.
So we obviously have a lot of coaches watching, and some of our audience is on the younger side as well. So, and you've obviously recently been like a new coach. So can you just share some advice for some of those younger coaches that are just getting started?
Well, I don't want to plug my own article, but I think one of the best resources I've given is I have like this 8 tips article where it's just 8 things like I learned as a young coach, like that the coaches taught me. But I think the big things, like always have like something to write with and write on. Like, doesn't matter if it's your 100th time watching this practice, right? There's something new you're going to pick up. Every meeting you're going to go to, there's going to have to be something to write down. Every time you're writing film, there's going to be some note. And then I think like another big piece of advice is be yourself. Like too many times young coaches be like, oh, I want to be like so-and-so. I want to be the next one of him. Well, be the next one of you. Like there's sometimes times I can find myself kind of turning a persona, but like guys can smell that a million miles away. So if we can just be ourselves, it's going to be a lot easier. It's going to be a lot easier for the guys to believe you, trust you. You're going to be easier to love for the players. And, I've been with coaches who are loud. I've been with coaches who are quiet. I've been with coaches who are gruff. I've been with coaches who don't know how to use a computer, which that's my other piece of advice for young guys. Learn technology, be a master of technology, because they'll find value for you and you'll be able to help out a lot of the older guys who don't know it, or you don't know when something's going to collapse on you, right? And you got to pick it up. And then, of course, like never stop learning. Like you don't know where, as I've said earlier, like I don't know where I'm going to pick up that piece of advice, or where I'm going to run into that interesting person who will help me out in my coaching career. And I think, constantly networking, not in a way that you're trying to schmooze and get up a level, but in a way where, hey, I'm going to keep finding more people who I know. And, that's one of the biggest reasons I'm active on Twitter, so I can keep finding more players, more people, and can keep getting the message of our program out there.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, I appreciate you responded to my message on Twitter, because that's obviously how we connected. So any last words before we hop off here, before we end it?
I mean, I want to really appreciate and thank you. I want to thank Coach Shields and all of our Minot team. We definitely got a great group of guys, and we're ready to keep taking this thing as far as we can go. And obviously it's year 1, but, there's going to be a different Beavers that people are going to be able to watch. And, I'm excited for everybody to get after football season. It only comes once a year, and it seems to go by way too fast. So thank you very much for having me on, Coach, and I'm excited to get to connect more.
Yes, sir. All right. Thanks, Coach.